Good morning, everyone. Today we are going to be looking at 3 lessons from Isaiah chapter 9. We've mentioned the fact that Isaiah 9 is going to deal with the destruction of the people of the northern kingdom, of them being taken away into captivity. God has been laying out before Ahaz what is about to transpire. And in the background of all of this, remember that God is giving these things to Ahaz at a time when the northern kingdom of Israel has allied themselves with Syria to their north to bring 2 armies against the kingdom of Judah. Now, Ahaz is not a righteous king. Ahaz does not care about what God has to say, and yet God is going to give him a great deal of this information to try to impress upon him, number one, all of the things that God is doing for him, but number two, the consequences that are coming to those people who do not listen to him. So as we come into chapter 9, there's a number of lessons and there's a number of things that will stand out as you go through the chapter. And to me, there's even more than these 3 things that I think we could spend time looking at, but I want to narrow it down to these 3 this morning, and I hope that you'll pull some of these other things out and relate those in our discussion through the chapter. The first thing that I find is maybe the first thing that jumps out to you in chapter 9 as well, and that is the statements of verses 6 and 7, where there Isaiah says, "For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulder, and his name will be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end, upon the throne of David and over his kingdom, to order it and establish it with judgment and justice from that time forward, even forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this." We're talking here about a prophecy concerning the Christ. As a matter of fact, Luke, when Luke records the message being given to Mary in Luke chapter 1, verse 32, is going to make reference to a number of these various factors in talking about what her son was going to be and what he was going to do. And so we have here in chapter 9, verses 6 and 7, another prophecy concerning Jesus. And one of the things that one of the individuals who's been studying with us has brought out, and I think it's a very important point to note, is that when you are just going through and reading the text, if you don't have a lot of the other information and a lot of the other things being brought together, you wouldn't necessarily look at certain statements and say, oh, this is a prophecy about the coming Messiah. We do, looking back, because we have the New Testament and we have various other things, we can look back on it and say, oh, here's what God was pointing to, because he said, this is what I was pointing to. But sometimes we get really in the face of the people of Israel in Jesus' day and at other times for not recognizing the prophecies that were there and what the promises were, when they are a foreshadowing of things to come. They are not simply stated out in bold letters of what exactly they're looking for and how exactly all of these things are going to fall into place. And so it is important for us to remember context of the statements, but also context of how they saw the statements or what they'd heard about the statements at the time when we read about this was that which was said by so-and-so. It gives us a bit of a different perspective. The second lesson that I want us to grab is from verse number 10. Because in verse number 10, in speaking about the people of Ephraim, or the people of Samaria, the northern kingdom of Israel, God says in verse 9, he says, "They say in their pride and arrogance of heart, the bricks have fallen down, and we will rebuild with hewn stones. The sycamores are cut down, but we will replace them with cedars." There is this haughtiness, there is this attitude of pride among the children of Israel that says, no matter what happens, no matter what destruction, what desolation, we will bring it back ourselves and make it bigger and better than it ever was. And a lot of times we in America have the exact same mentality. No matter what happens to us, we will come back, we'll be stronger, we'll be bigger, we'll be better than ever before. But the point that God's trying to make is that Israel is trying to do this without him. Israel is saying we don't need God, we can do it all by ourselves. Israel would have had the ability to come back, to be bigger, greater, better, stronger than ever before. But they've turned their back on God. And God says, in your pride and in your arrogance, you think that you can do all of these things yourself without my help. And you can't. It will be your destruction. We need to remember, living in our day and time, that while there are a lot of things that we can do, we are not able to do everything by ourselves. We cannot overcome everything by ourselves. We will not make it out of everything by ourselves. And pride and arrogance can be our downfall just as much as it was for the children of Israel. The third lesson I want us to pull out is from the end of chapter 9 in verses 19 through 21, where there he says, through the wrath of the Lord of hosts the land is burned up, and the people shall be as fuel for the fire. No man shall spare his brother, and he shall snatch on the right hand and be hungry. He shall devour on the left hand and not be satisfied. Every man shall eat the flesh of his own arm. Ephraim shall devour Manasseh, or Manasseh shall devour Ephraim, and Ephraim Manasseh. Together they shall be against Judah. For all this his anger is not turned away, but his hand is stretched out still. Here God describes at the end of chapter 9 what happens when wickedness controls people. And that is, they turn on each other. Wickedness brings about selfishness. Wickedness brings about an attitude that says, I'm only concerned about me. And he says the people of Israel are going to start devouring each other in times of hardship. It's exactly what we see in the world around us. When wickedness reigns, you do not have help for those who are in need. You do not have strength that is being utilized by working together, by standing with one another, by helping one another along, but rather you have individuals devouring one another, doing everything they can to best one another, to get past one another, to leave one another behind, because it's all about me. And it's all about what's going to be in my best interests. When wickedness reigns, people turn on one another. When goodness and kindness and godliness reign, we look out for one another. We take care of one another. Not just as an outward appearance, but out of a true, generous love for what is best for somebody else. Those are some of the things that I pulled out of chapter 9. What did you find? What do you see as you examine what God says here? I hope you have a good day. We will come back in our next session, and we will begin looking at chapter 10. Have a great day.